and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris, here with my co-host and A to Z Sports Tennessee writer, Zach Ragan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so very much for listening to us. We talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast, and if you want to listen to that every week, make sure you go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple, Spotify, and subscribe, because if you subscribe, you won't miss a single episode when we drop them on Mondays. I'm at Charlie_Burris. Zach is at ZachTNT. At A to Z Sports on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville and A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach and I write on the old internets. This episode is so very graciously brought to you by HelloFresh, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, Zach, after a devastating week last week, or I guess a devastating weekend, I'll say, Tennessee basketball gives us whiplash, wins the SEC tournament one week, and then blows it in the NCAA tournament the next week. Monday, during our show, Nico Iamaleava. Dude, I love that name so much. It's fun to say. Nico commits to Tennessee in the middle of our show while we were talking about him. Unbelievably. I swear to you, we did not plan that. It was incredible. A truly genuine moment on this show. We don't have many of those. We're total shills. We don't like to be genuine. But in that moment, we truly were shocked by what was unfolding in front of us. So that was great. You got this arguably the top quarterback in this coming class, if you ask me. And then Tennessee baseball, come the weekend, goes and slaps Ole Miss across the face like they're Chris Rock. I didn't plan out exactly how I was going to say that. I had it in my head. I messed that up. But Tennessee was Will Smith. Ole Miss was Chris Rock. And these losers sent Lane Kiffin out here on the mound at the beginning of this baseball series to throw a golf ball. And Tennessee said, and I took that personally. And they went and destroyed Ole Miss. Did you watch these baseball games, Zach? It was so much fun, man.
Yeah, I mean, I was in and out of them all weekend, and man, just the reaction from the Ole Miss fans. Like you talk about Kentucky fans whenever they lose a basketball game to Tennessee and the reaction to it. It was kind of like that almost, just on a little bit of a smaller scale. I mean, Ole Miss fans on Twitter were just completely broken. I mean, I've seen tweets about how they want to fire their longtime head coach, Mike Bianco, who's been there for 20 plus years, and hire Tony Vitello, which is such a pipe dream. It's about like Georgia going after the Baylor coach, Scott Drew. Like, it's not going to happen. It's a fantasy. But really, the not just the fans, the players. I mean, you saw just a total from Friday night where they were kind of embarrassed that they lost to Tennessee. They tried to throw some shade at Tennessee. They said they took Tennessee lightly because they play in a small ballpark. And obviously that's not, the reason that Tennessee has excelled this season. But then those comments, and they one of their pitchers, I believe, guaranteed a win on Saturday against Tennessee. Tennessee comes out, wins 10-3 again, finishes the sweep on Sunday. And then you have players saying, well, we know they're the best team in the country, and there's no way we took them lightly, despite what some of my teammates said. So it's a pretty interesting change of tone that came from the Ole Miss baseball program through the course of the weekend.
I just can't get over. Every single element of this was so perfect. Ole Miss is number one. Did we even say that yet? Ole Miss was the number one team in America, supposedly. Clearly, I don't believe that was the case, because Tennessee is your number one team in America. As of this morning, Monday morning, Tennessee was named by Baseball America and I think D1 Baseball both as number one. I would guess that they would probably be unanimous number one. They have the best record in all of college baseball currently at 23 3-1. They are undefeated in the SEC and swept the previous number 1 team in America. I don't know how much more of a statement you could make in that way. It was just crazy. But what I can't get over, and I tweeted about this twice because it was just so ridiculous, the Lane Kiffin thing. They thought they were so cute. They brought this idiot out here, Mr. Fake Injury himself, rolled him out onto the mound for the opening pitch of the series, sold out crowd in Swayze Stadium. And he has a baseball and he throws it to the side. Ha, ha, ha. Here's the golf ball. Look at it. Throws that as the first pitch. And Tennessee summarily beat their ass. Just destroyed them. And it's so funny. And then, I mean, it was really just whipped cream on top of the whole dessert with their players going out and saying, oh, well, we took them lightly and we'll win tomorrow. That was funny all in itself. But man, it was poetic justice after all the fake injuries and the terrible refs and the throwing of mustard bottles and all those things. It brought it all full circle. That moment, yes, we laugh about it now, but that moment, I mean, frankly, it was painful. It was a Tennessee loss, and it did make the Tennessee fan base look not great on the national stage, and it really brought it full circle and shut the door on that whole thing, which I am very, very happy about. Put that in the rearview mirror, and so great weekend all around. A very nice recovery after what was pretty tough to swallow loss in the NCAA tournament last week.
Yeah, it might have shut the door on the golf ball thing on our end for sure, but I don't think it did on Lane Kiffin's end because he's going to continue to put that golf ball on Twitter. I'm sure at SEC Media Days this year, he will have that golf ball at the podium at some point. Like, he's not going to let this die. And I don't know if you noticed Tennessee's home run celebration. They had a bottle of mustard out with this celebration, which is pretty nice retort to Lane Kiffin's golf ball first pitch.
That was pretty funny. Pretty dang funny. I will admit the entire thing, just when you play that well, and it was so comprehensive. Even the final score of the last game, of the third game, does appear to be close, but Tennessee had a 4-run lead for the bulk of that game. They got a 4-run lead early, and they held on to it until the 8th inning, and then they gave up a 3-run homer, and then that was all that Ole Miss scored. Ole Miss literally did not have a good moment that entire weekend outside of that one home run. That was the single good moment. That was it.
Sweeping a college baseball team is tough, especially a team like Ole Miss is not the number 1 team in the country. You know, they fell to number 10 this week, but they're still a pretty good team. Like, it's not like Tennessee just smashed a trash team or something. Like, Ole Miss is a good baseball team. They have talent, but you play these weekend series, it's your 3 best pitchers against their 3 best pitchers pretty much always, as long as everyone's healthy. It's a really tough thing to do, and to go on the road and win that series the way they did, especially on Sunday, where I'm sure Tennessee's feeling pretty good after they've took the first 2 games of the series easily, and then to hang on in a nail-biter, like, kind of became a nail-biter late, where, you know, Ole Miss just needs to get a guy on base in the 9th inning to start a rally, tie the game, hold on and win that game, I think says as much about Tennessee's baseball team as anything I saw this week. Just the fact that Vitello kept them engaged in the moment and from not getting too outside of themselves.
It was a true statement in the realist way of just showing the college baseball world, we are here. This is real. We are the real deal. Don't mess around. I do not believe that Ole Miss actually took Tennessee lightly. Tennessee came into that game leading the SEC in almost every single meaningful statistical category. We've just been smashing everyone. Yeah, it was at home. Yes, Lindsey Nelson plays small. That is true, but that doesn't matter because you have certifiable proof that it's not, first of all, it's not only the hitting. First of all, not every home run is right at the wall, you know, and not every Tennessee has scored a ton of runs that aren't home runs.
Well, the silly thing about that is that I understand if you want to look at a specific player's stats and say they're a bit inflated because of the stadium. It's the same thing in MLB with the Colorado Rockies playing at Coors Field in the high altitude. The ball just carries. I understand that, but it has nothing to do with a win-loss record. You're playing the team you're playing is in the same condition, same stadium. They have the same, fences out there. Like they're not. It's the same challenge that they're facing that you're facing. So it has nothing to do with wins or losses to me.
No, it's really just the demanding of respect that needed to be done by Tennessee baseball, I guess.
Yeah.
I didn't say that exactly right, but I think you know what I mean. It just, Tennessee has been not good for so long that to truly convince people that you are that team, the College World Series could just be a flash in the pan last year with a fun team. And they're really showing that it wasn't. That Vitello is a powerhouse, that he's one of the best coaches in America right now, and that he has put together a very good team that is sustainable over a long period of time. You have guys. The most exciting thing about all of this is the structure of what is great about this team. 2 of your 3 great pitchers right now essentially have 3 aces in rotation at the moment, and 2 of them are freshmen. The other one is a sophomore. That's like just a treasure trove for Tennessee baseball, because you get those guys in successive years. Like they can't leave Tennessee for what is it, another 2
after
years,
your third
right?
year.
Yeah, until they're juniors. And so, I mean, with Burns slinging it and the way, and obviously the whole pitching staff in general, Camden Sewell had, he's had a couple of rough outings, but otherwise he's been pretty good. Like, it's just all there for this team, and 2 of your best pitchers still haven't played. This was an exciting note from that series to throw in. Blade Tidwell warmed up in the bullpen, and that is good. And he didn't play, but it's.
I liked Vitello's comment about that, where he said he was tired of getting texts that were basically death threats from Tidwell wanting to play.
I don't bring him back too soon, because you don't need
to. Yeah.
You don't need to. These dudes are slinging it right now. And you're gonna, outside of this super top tier competition, Ole Miss this week, Vanderbilt coming up this next week, you don't need them. Against like a Western Carolina, that's the next game in midweek this week. Like, you don't need any of those dudes. And against maybe, I don't know, who's at the bottom of the league right now, Alabama, like you're not going to need them. So exciting times for Tennessee baseball. There's just really no other way to say it. It's a special thing. Hopefully, obviously, the deal is you got to carry it throughout the entire season. Actually, this was an interesting note, just to put it a little bit in perspective, to sort of be like, this is super exciting, but don't put the cart before the horse. So a friend of mine sent this to me, said the record in the history of SEC baseball, the best record ever in the history of SEC baseball was 26-3 from Vanderbilt in 2013. 26-3. That means they only, I would assume, I'd have to go and look, but I would assume they did not lose a series, and they swept almost all of them, which is crazy. And that team did not win the College World Series. So,
really?
like, don't put the cart
like
before the horse.
Dansby Swanson team or something.
It probably was. Vanderbilt's a dynasty at this point. They are, they were in the college, probably not rightfully so, but they were in the College World Series last year in the final. So there's that with baseball. Go and enjoy it. I believe this next series is at Vanderbilt. So go to Vanderbilt and wear orange in their stupid stadium in Nashville and show up, because we all know there's so many Tennessee fans in Nashville. Go to those games and be loud and annoy Tennessee fans. Especially go and find the Vandy Whistler and go annoy that guy because he's the worst, the absolute worst. So with that being said, we will now move on to what the good folks at home have been waiting for since the day that the football season ended. Spring practice began this week, last Tuesday. There has been about a week's worth of practices at this point, and we're going to break them all down. But first, we got to break down Hello Fresh, the amazing, amazing sponsor of this show. We thank them so much for helping out the boys here on the Big Orange podcast. HelloFresh delivers pre-portioned ingredients to your door, including farm fresh produce that arrives within a week, so you get convenience without skimping on quality at all. Skip the trip to the grocery store, saving you the wait in long lines. I mean, I went this week to Costco to get groceries and different stuff, and what a nightmare. Never again will you have to do that if you get HelloFresh for your grocery needs. Skip the long lines and ensure that you don't waste money on excess food with HelloFresh. Zach, tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you're wanting to go down this road, HelloFresh, and you're worried about the options, HelloFresh offers over 50 different menu items. They've got vegetarian if you're into that. If you're in a diet, they've got fit and friendly. They've got family friendly for some of that comfort food that you might enjoy on a weeknight. And they've also got gourmet options, a little more maybe upscale options for you there. But that's the great thing is you get into some of these meal delivery services and you don't have a lot of variety. You don't have to worry about that with HelloFresh. There's plenty of variety, always something different. Coming up with a meal to eat every weeknight is a tough thing to do, and this eliminates that stress from your life.
I brought this in here to show on the video. YouTube.com, A to Z Sports. Go search it up on YouTube, and you can see the video. I should have said that. Dang it. I just realized I missed that at the beginning of the show. YouTube.com, search A to Z Sports, and subscribe to the channel. But I brought this with us to show on the video. This is the meal card that HelloFresh sends you. I mean, look at that. What came out of the box looked like that. Like we made it, and that's what it looked like. This was pub-style shepherd's pie with white cheddar and thyme mashed potatoes. It was ridiculously good, super tasty. They give you that with this awesome picture on the front to see what it should look like, and then they give you the directions on the back, and then they send you all the pre-portioned products right to you. No food waste, no grocery store. HelloFresh, man, they killer sponsor that we can't thank them enough for sponsoring the show. And here's the deal, man. I'm forgetting everything. Here's the graphic right here on YouTube. Again, youtube.com. You can see the graphic. Vols16 is your promo code. Vols16, 16 free meals and 3 free gifts if you use that code at hellofresh.com/Vols16. Code Vols16 for up to 16 free meals, 3 free gifts. hellofresh.com/Vols16. That's HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Again, helping out the boys. Thank you so much to them. And we can't appreciate it enough. Now, spring football, Zach, started last Tuesday. Exciting times on Rocky Top, especially after you got that commitment from Nico last week. I got to wonder, it seemed like that had been in the works. They made this fancy video for him, and all of the recruiting guys essentially knew it was coming, it seemed like. Did they very specifically time that commitment to basically be the day before spring practice started? You get hyped for spring practice, and then you go into spring practice. Obviously, Nico is not there, but it sort of brings Tennessee football back into the limelight. I can't help but think that might have been planned, right? It seems that way.
I hadn't really thought about it like that, but I think you're spot on, because you've got a lot of recruits taking visits this spring, and there's some at Tennessee practice today. Brew McCoy, a USC wide receiver who entered the transfer portal in January, I think, looking for a new home. Rumors that he's in the student directory at Tennessee already. That might be confirmed. I'm not sure. Doesn't mean it's binding that he's going to end up at Tennessee, but looks like a pretty strong possibility that he's going to be on Tennessee's roster this fall. And that'd be a huge addition. Former 5-star recruit, built like a linebacker type guy, kind of maybe like a DK Metcalf type receiver who's just fully imposing, hard to tackle. It would be a huge added weapon for Tennessee. But to get to your point, he goes into this visit knowing that, hey, this program's on the rise. Like Nico's coming. I don't know how many years of eligibility McCoy has left, but maybe he's looking at, who's going to be his quarterback next year after Hendon Hooker leaves. Either way, just the vibe around Tennessee is everything's on the up and up right now. And just having Nico in the mix right before spring practice really just makes that even more noticeable at Tennessee spring practices as these recruits visit.
Yeah, you just want to have momentum around whatever you're doing. If you're Josh Heupel right now, I think it obviously serves them to have things that might be planned like that. If that is what actually happened, where they kind of said, "Hey, it would be great if you could announce this on X day," or whatever it might be. You just want to have that buzz going. Tennessee is such a huge brand with when it wants to wield it, it has so much power. And I think a lot of people dismiss, like national analysts maybe dismiss, that Tennessee sells itself. It truly does. You can try to dismiss it. The fact is that it does. And so I think they're doing a fantastic job right now with the way that this could have been such a extremely tough time for Tennessee football. The way that Heupel has handled it masterful is probably the right word. He's done such an excellent job through all of this, and working with all the resources with Danny White, who's such a, I guess, really a money guy. He was known coming in for his fundraising ability, and clearly he is good at that. And clearly he was the right guy for the job to coordinate the NIL stuff, and they've done such a great job with that. And I can't say enough with the start of spring practice at this point, and you kind of feel the hype a little bit around this Tennessee football team, man. Who would have thought a year after Josh Heupel was in here with that NCAA investigation going on and everything happening, who would have thought that you would have had this many positive feelings about Tennessee football right now? It's credit to them. Huge credit to them, man.
Yeah, I mean, Barrett Sally, how do
I always say Salee.
Salee, I think that's Barrett Salee. Okay.
Need to have him on, ask him.
Yeah. Right before we started recording, he put out a tweet that said Tennessee is number one in the Baseball America Top 25. They just won the SEC men's basketball tournament, and they have more football momentum than every team in the SEC East not named Georgia.
Yeah.
It's like it all coincides with Danny White coming in. Like Danny White is, I know Vitello was already there, Barnes is already there, but he's really cultivated a winning atmosphere. Then he's the guy that hires Heupel, who we were skeptical of when the hire was first made. I actually went back and looked at our text with Austin Stanley that co-owns A to Z Sports from the night that Heupel was hired, and there was a lot of speculation. Like, is this the right move? Like, is this a big enough hire? Because we really didn't know that much about Josh Heupel. This turned out to be an absolutely perfect hire. Could not have been a better fit just for for the situation that Tennessee's in and who Heupel is as a coach and how he has that CEO type mindset that we've talked about a lot that Jeremy Pruitt was lacking. It's really, I know 7-6 isn't 10-3. It's not a great season if you look at it outside of the current situation. But the more I think about what Tennessee accomplished last season, the more impressive it really is.
I cannot agree more. And so now you go into spring ball, and the general feeling is good, as we're saying, around all of Tennessee athletics, as exciting as that is. And so where exactly should we start here? Because there is a lot to talk about with Tennessee football outside of just, hey, things are going well. That does very much seemed to be the case. I mean, should we just start here, Zach? Well, okay. This is where we'll start. We should give our preface to spring practice. Both of us were for a decent amount of time in Tennessee media where we went to practices and we interviewed the coaches and we did the whole thing. So this opinion does not come out of nowhere. This is not just us being kind of cynical about this for no reason. When you are in media and you cover these spring practices, you realize that very much on purpose, Tennessee shows you very little. And that's the thing across college football. Every coach does that. They just purposefully don't show you that much. They just give you these little tidbits. Oh, here they are stretching. Here they are. We're going to run a kickoff drill. Here they are. We're gonna just use the jugs machine for the wide receivers. It's like, yeah, this looks fine on a video, and you can write about it and say this guy looks like he has good hands, but ultimately don't pull a ton out of spring practice because we don't get to see the real stuff. Put it that way. On purpose. They do that on purpose. It is nobody's fault. They purposely don't show you the good stuff. But we're going to try to do the best that we can. And this is going to be such a real live moment, Zach. My computer's about to die, and we can't. This is live. We record this live to tape. I got to go run, and I don't have my charger right here. I got to go run into the next room and get it because I'm an idiot, because I'm very stupid and I don't plan correctly to do this show. So Phil, I need to hear what you say, but you're Phil for like 30 seconds here. I got to go run and get this riff on spring ball on what I just said about how you don't get to see that much and go.
Yeah. Charlie's definitely not wrong about that. Most of what you hear from beat reporters when they're reporting on practice is basically things they've heard around the facility, because you really don't see that much. It's hard to really get a true opinion of a player when you just see them stretching, going through some individual drills. It's really tough. A great example of this is the fact that Tennessee's football coaches watched spring practice last spring and felt like Joe Milton was their guy. I mean, these are coaches that they know how to develop quarterbacks, and they watched spring practice and they thought Joe Milton he needs to be the starting quarterback. And if Tennessee's coaches can't discern who needs to be the starting quarterback based on the practice portions that only they see, that the media doesn't even see, I mean, that tells you how little the media can really glean from these practices. So, Charlie, I mentioned that most of what you see reported is more to do with what reporters are kind of hearing from the coaching staff, not what they're seeing.
Yes, and we wanted to get into some of that because really in this case, the only people that you can truly rely on during a spring ball, fall ball practice time are the coaches, because they actually get to see it all. And so some of these notes that we gathered, let's talk about some of these. Now let's get into this. Is what everybody wants to know about. You were referencing the quarterback battles in the past. Everybody wants to know about Tavin Jackson, right? He's a brand new quarterback coming in. He was a pretty highly sought after guy, big get for Alex Golesh. And this is what Golesh said about Tavin Jackson during his media session last week. I think it was over the weekend on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yep, Golesh said, Tavin Jackson just had a really, really good day. Tavin is really, really fun. Golesh says really a lot. This is Golesh again, quote, he's a really good athlete. He's got a really quick release. He's really grasped the offense through 3 days well. It'll be interesting to see as things pile up. You go into days 4, 5, 6, pads on today, what he actually looks like. So that's encouraging. You want to hear that about that quarterback room. I think a lot of people are kind of wondering, where does he stand in that rotation if you're going to bring in Nico? Now, does he almost get pushed out? But for the time being, he's essentially your number 3 guy, and you have to think about him in that way. And he might, depending on how he looks, he might end up being that number 2 guy. So those are encouraging words out of Golish.
Yeah, I think he will be the number 2 guy. I don't know if it'll be that way to start the season. I think you're looking at a situation where Hendon Hooker gets banged up in a game, early season game. Joe Milton's probably going to come in to relieve him for a series or however long it is, maybe the rest of the game. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But if it's a situation where, hey, Hendon Hooker's going to be out for the rest of the season, worst case scenario, it's October. I think you're looking at maybe like a Tavin Jackson, kind of like a Josh Dobbs situation where it's like, okay, let's put him in. He brings some stuff to the offense that maybe Joe Milton doesn't, such as accuracy. And I think that'll be the situation. But as far as does this push Tavin Jackson out, the addition of Nico in 2023? Maybe. I mean, it really doesn't matter if you're a Tennessee fan. All you care about is the best. Tennessee finds one of those quarterbacks that can be elite. It really doesn't matter which one it is. Tennessee fans shouldn't care. If it's Nico, that's great. Tennessee fans aren't, well, I guess they kind of through the collective maybe, but they're not directly paying Nico to be at Tennessee. Whichever one it is, like, does it matter who wins the job? I mean, I wouldn't care. Somebody's going to transfer. That's the landscape of college football at this point. You get 3 or 4 quarterbacks that are elite. 2 of them are automatically gone pretty much if they're not the starter, and the other one might be shortly thereafter. So you got to sign 2 or 3 guys. You can't put all your eggs in one basket and count on just Nico being the guy or just Tavin. Like, you've always got to be adding a quarterback and ready for somebody to depart.
I had a great conversation over the weekend. I want to make sure I get the name of the show right. The Chase Thomas podcast. I know the guy's name is Chase Thomas, but I think that I want to make sure I got the name of his show right. Had a great conversation on that show. Go listen to it. He's a cool guy. He's a Tennessee grad student right now and a Tennessee fan. And we had a great conversation about Nico and kind of the implications of that whole situation. But what you're going to start seeing, and you really already are seeing, is it really is kind of a feeder league to the feeder league, where you're going to get a guy who goes to Tulane, and they're great at Tulane. They just got overlooked in their recruitment initially. They go to Tulane, and then a big brand in college football, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Alabama, whoever, is going to go and get that guy. And because the transfer portal, with the immediate eligibility that you have now, like I said, it's basically a feeder league to a feeder league, with college football being the feeder league to the NFL. Lower group of 5 college football is the feeder league to the feeder league, if that makes sense, where you're going to have these guys in a farm system, essentially, where they come up from AAA to AA, and you're great at Tulane, and then it's a given that you're going to get an NIL deal and you're going to be going to Tennessee. And I think you're exactly right. You're going to see it so much at the quarterback position, just because it's going to be such a revolving door there, because there's only one guy who can do it. It's not like wide receivers where you have 4 of them. It's not like running backs where you got 3 of them. It's not like defensive linemen where you got a whole set. There is one quarterback, and he gets the ball in his hands on every single play. And so I think you will see transfers. I think the quarterback room is in no way set when Nico gets here, as it's just going to be like him and Tavin Jackson. I think you're exactly right. There probably is going to be another person that comes in that we have no idea who it is at this point yet.
Well, look at LSU. LSU has like 3 guys that could start, and they added a transfer. I think you're going to start seeing programs like Alabama, Georgia, USC under Lincoln Riley. Oklahoma's been doing it for quite a while when Lincoln was there. Their primary quarterback is going to start coming from the portal, I think, more and more, because you're going to have those guys like you talked about. And it's not just the group of 5 level. If Purdue signs a 4-star quarterback that ends up being the next Joe Burrow, he's going to spend that last year somewhere else, Alabama or Georgia,
Yep.
and go win a national championship. Like, that's why I don't think Georgia or Alabama was that upset about missing on Nico. Like, they're going to go all in on Arch. If they don't get Arch, they're going to get another quarterback, whether it's the portal, the next best option on the recruit list. Like, they're going to be okay at that position.
It's an interesting time as far as all that goes. And by interesting, I mean it's the craziest time that we've ever seen in our life in college football. It's the Wild West, it's the new frontier. And all of this is just kind of unfolding. And again, credit to Josh Heupel here. Let's hype him up again. Hype up the hype man. The way that he's handled it thus far, obviously the NIL thing with like potentially setting a precedent with an $8 million deal for Nico, if that is what actually happened. On top of that, the way that they're navigating the transfer portal and just he hasn't had this giant exodus of guys on top of having a limited roster. It's huge and well done by him and his staff, and not having giant staff turnover and things like that. I mean, they just handled it really well. Another kind of feather in their cap. But some other notes from spring practice, you had, here's just a few quick ones that we don't necessarily have to hash out all the way. Defensive backs Kamal Haddon, Warren Burrell, Brandon Turnage, and Deshaun Rucker were out with injury of some kind, undisclosed. Tight end Miles Campbell, linebacker William Mohan, out with separate injuries. That was a note from Rocky Top Insider. And then moving to the defense, from the offense with with Tavin Jackson looking good. There was talk that Elijah Simmons on the defensive line was looking the best he's ever looked. That's exciting because the defensive line needs some help. You are really, I was going to say you're perilously thin at like the cornerback spot, the defensive backs in general. Really, you're perilously thin at every single position on the defense. There's not really a position that you look at and you go, that room is set. They look great. That's definitely, we're not going to have any problems at that position. There's so many open questions on the defensive side of the ball right now that to hear something like Elijah Simmons is having a really good camp. He looks like he's kind of honing in physically and making himself better. That's amazing to hear, because you got to have some developments like that with this squad. It has to happen.
Oh, absolutely. You hit on the cornerbacks being injured there just a little bit. That, to me, that's the biggest thing that Tennessee's got to figure out this spring, is some depth there, because they'd be in a pretty tough situation right now if they season started right now. I wrote about this last week, and I don't know if you saw it or not, but I don't see why they haven't tried to move Jimmy Holiday from wide receiver to defense. He's quick. He has great football knowledge. He's a quarterback in high school, smart guy, 6 foot, 205 pounds. You could maybe put him at cornerback, or maybe even put him at safety, move somebody that you're working at safety over the cornerback. That's a little more interchangeable at the collegiate level. I don't know if he's quite, he's built more like a safety, but I'd like to see him at either position. I mean, as thin as you are at defensive back, then wide receiver is one position where you have some decent depth, especially if Brew McCoy ends up here this fall. And I don't see why that's a move they haven't made yet. I mean, you need the depth worse at cornerback. I think he seems like the type of guy that just wants to get on the field. I mean, he signed with Tennessee as a quarterback, wanted to play quarterback, got moved to wide receiver after like a week or two of practice that year. So I think he'd be willing to make the move. And who knows? Maybe that opens his kind of like Delonte Taylor was a wide receiver when he first signed with Tennessee, and now he's probably going to be a safety in the NFL, 4th or 5th round draft pick. I mean, Jimmy Holiday could have that same trajectory where right now he's not on an NFL radar at all. Maybe moving to the defense puts him on that radar.
That's a great point. I think they're going to have to get creative like that in a general sense if you're going to have some really paper thin positions until some of these freshmen can grow. You got to work with the athletes that you have, and that's a good point, especially if you bring in Brew McCoy. You do have depth, thankfully, at that wide receiver position. See what you can work out, and maybe Because obviously, even if those guys haven't played defensive back, you understand as a wide receiver the dynamics. You could flip that around and go, if I know how I would work as a wide receiver, and I know how I would work against myself as a cornerback.
And you add being a former quarterback into that too, and really the knowledge is there for him.
Yes, exactly. So I would love to see them at least try some things like that, and that's certainly stuff that we would look out for. Now, that is something that you can glean from a spring practice session.
Yeah, positions are.
Yes, and kind of analyzing what might happen there. Hasn't been a ton of that, and so we'll obviously keep an eye out for it. But I would love to see that, just to try to help those boys out, because they might need it. They might need it. Another, just a couple of notes that we had gotten there. There was actually a practice today, but it was nothing. We're recording before the interviews happen with the coaches, and so forgive us if we miss a big news drop. I don't
know if Rodney Gardner is going to put anything too major out there today.
Yeah, I don't think that there will be one. But some other notes from over the weekend, at least, again from Golish and his time talking to the media. He pointed out freshman Chaz Nimrod. He said he was standing out early, and he's noticed improvement from a year ago from returning receivers, the guy you mentioned, Jimmy Holiday, and Jimmy Callaway, and Ramel Keaton. And so those are some more nice notes. You want to get during these spring practices at least a feel for how some of these new guys are going to look, because Tennessee is in a position where some of those guys are going to need to play. Whoever they may be, again, at the wide receiver position, you do actually have some depth, but we'll definitely be looking for notes about young guys who is standing out, and specifically who could actually be an immediate contributor, because we need that right now with this team.
Yeah, for sure. And something else that's needed is leadership on the defensive side of the ball. Matthew Butler last year was a major team leader for Tennessee. I mean, he really kind of set the tone for the defensive line and the defense in general, along with Alontae Taylor and Jeremy Banks to some extent. And I think this year you'll see Jeremy Banks step up more. Another guy that's really stepping up so far, reportedly in spring practice, is Tyler Barron on the defensive line. That's huge. You've always got to have that defensive lineman there in the trenches. That's just a strong team leader. If you have that, you got your linebacker in Banks, and then somebody in the secondary that you can count on. That's what you got to have on defense. So it's encouraging that some of those team leaders are stepping up early, because really that's what the mark of a winning football team is. You got to have strong team leadership on both sides of the ball. It can't just be the coaches. It's got to be players when you're out there on the field. And Tennessee's had some great ones in the past. Jawan Jennings, Kurt Magid, AJ Johnson. We've seen some tremendous team leaders out there. So hopefully we'll continue to see that develop this spring. Hopefully.
And we'll just see it. It's still early. You're obviously in week one, and it's also kind of an odd situation because all of this won't culminate in a spring game. Tennessee they're having kind of a spring festival sort of on campus for fans, and then on a big screen they're showing a scrimmage for the team. It's kind of an odd situation, and it's all that's not them trying to keep anything secret because of the renovations in Neyland. I was actually down there this last week. You can see the work that they're doing. I saw the VOLS letters sitting outside of the stadium. I think they were still, I don't think that they were like the letters that are going to go up there, though. I think they're just like promo letters that they had as like.
Yeah, they had people like taking pictures with them last football season, I think.
But that is obviously, I love that, and that they're putting that back up there whenever that will be. But the renovations are coming along, but they won't be done in time for spring ball, so they kind of have to work around it. I like that they're at least giving that effort, because realistically speaking, spring ball is huge for the team. You want to get these dudes as many practice reps as you can get, especially with a team that's kind of green like Tennessee's is. But ultimately, it's also a huge marketing opportunity. We've already kind of touched on it. Heupel's doing a really good job kind of building momentum around his team. But just with the fans, you want to set out excitement, and you want to ultimately for Tennessee, you want to sell some of the season tickets during this time, give people something to hope for, hope that the product's going to be good. And so they're doing their best with what they have.
I like what they're doing. The scrimmage is not going to be broadcast anywhere else. So if you want to see it, if you're a diehard Tennessee football fan, you have to attend to see that. I had an idea. I never really put this in writing. I don't think we talked about it. It's just kind of in my head. I wish they would have done like a stream, like a live stream of a scrimmage in the practice facility, indoor practice facility, maybe, and then have like the coaches mic'd up, like Heupel and Golish and maybe Tim Banks, and just select coaches, maybe some players. I don't know. Just go through a scrimmage and stream that like on one of the SEC Network Plus or something. I feel like that could have been a fun thing to do. I've seen baseball spring training teams, spring training games teams do that before, and it's just something really fun to a game that otherwise, like we talked about, you can't really glean much from it. You're not going to make any big revelations watching a spring scrimmage where Tennessee's doesn't even really have their full team, like you mentioned, that they're trying random things, moving guys around. It'd just be a fun element, and maybe that could generate some revenue for the program. But also, they're very secret about stuff, so they probably don't want a lot of the communication between coaches being heard by the public.
I still always kind of say this. I do and I don't get the secretive thing, because the way that I always sum this up is that back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, you could go and watch Tennessee's entire practice up until into the 2010s, almost. You could watch the entire practice. It was really when Butch showed up, like that, the start of that era, and this was in college football at large. It sort of started around that time, 2012-ish. Everybody started locking down, getting secretive and everything. I don't know who set that tone initially, but before, you could watch the whole practice and report on it and whatever else. And Tennessee football was a lot better back then. So I don't know what the correlation is there, but they handled it just fine back in those days.
My theory is that it's not so much that they're worried about what another team's going to see, because it's all on tape. Like, you're not, like, maybe some random trick play that you're probably not going to practice in front of the public or reporters, like, that's all you're going to really conceal. Otherwise, it's on tape. They know what you're going to do. You know what they're going to do. I think it's to prevent negative stories, negative media coverage, because there's so much stuff that happens in a practice. Did you see the conflict between Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra at the Miami Heat game the other night, where they're literally like going at each other?
Yes. Yeah, right? I did see that.
And it was a teammate, I think one of the Heat players, that commented and said, I have never been on a team where something like that didn't happen. And like, it's nothing. That's just, you guys just saw it. But that stuff happens all the time with teams. And it's true. Like, you get heated moments. You see it when we, in the summers, how many practices into NFL training camp do we go before we hear the first Patriots practice was canceled early because of a fight? 2 fights broke out. They all have, like, it happens. And I think college programs are trying to protect their athletes from that kind of coverage. Like, that's where I think it stems from.
I mean, they used to do things just in my time, which I did it up till 2019. I was doing it. Even in that time, sometimes you would see something. You see a guy get injured, tweak something, and have to sit out reps, and they would come over to you and be like, "Do not put that out publicly. Do not. We will do it." And they have to come and and this is kind of inside baseball stuff. Like, fans don't really care who puts that information out there. But as I said, I get it and I don't. There are strategic advantages to not having some of that stuff get out there, not have an ugly look. PR is certainly important. No doubt about that. But
if you didn't put such a lid on that stuff when something did happen, it wouldn't be so shocking. You know, when inevitably something will happen in an open portion of the media that reporters are going to want to clamor to because you don't get stuff like that very often.
well,
So yeah, it makes it way more shocking when you barely ever hear about it.
and here's a big part of it to me. It holds the coaches in college football more accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And they make a ton of money from public universities that are publicly funded. It's not a lot of times it's not necessarily public cash that's going into their hands. A lot of it is like revenue from football games and things, but still paid a ton of money by public universities. And I think with a guy like Butch Jones, who reportedly, I don't want to say he was abusing anybody, but was a jerk behind closed doors, you would have been able to see more of him, and he would have felt more pressure to not be that guy if media is sitting there watching and could report on the things that he does.
Well, it's just
and it can protect against stuff like that.
It's just like the Brian Harsin situation at Auburn, where they have to do this whole investigation into how he's been handling practices and what kind of environment he's cultivated there. That would erase any of those questions because it's all there. It's all public. Yeah.
Media could have been there to see like, oh, he is that guy. Oh, he's not that guy, So I see both sides. It is what it is. We just want to give you the full context, because anybody that is telling you that there's just a ton of stuff to take from spring practice, they're lying to you. They're making things up.
And I've said this before, the main objective of an open practice is for photos and B-roll video that will be in the background of the news story at 6:00, just random players. That is the main purpose. It says that in the media guidelines. Like, this is the main purpose of this being open, just so you can have some content for your media company. Like, that's all it is. It's not so you can figure anything out about what Tennessee's doing personnel wise. And they're very strict still about what you can and can't report on. They don't want you reporting on injuries. It's become a little stricter under Josh Heupel with stuff like that. I think you actually can tweet during practice now. Under Butch Jones, that was a big no-no. You could not live tweet anything about practice until after the media session with the coach, which is very strange. I never understood that at all.
Yeah, that was very much not allowed in the old Butch days. If they would come and I got reprimanded on multiple occasions.
Were you tweeting?
I don't know if it was over tweets. This is a fun little account. I won't get too specific here, but just to give you an idea of how serious they were, and I don't think that it is like this right now with Heupel, but me and another person that was at the practice, we were just in like the hallway. I don't remember exactly where it was in the facility there, talking not so kindly about Butch, just whatever we were saying. I literally do not remember what it was, but someone, another media member, a staff member, somebody, I don't know, overheard, and me and that person, whoever it may have been, both got taken to the principal's office, essentially, and got stirred talking to. Don't say bad things about Butch in Butch's house.
Who gave you the talking to? Like the SID at the time, or
it was,
or was it like one of the media relations people?
Yeah, I won't get too specific. I mean, obviously, I can tell you there.
Exactly I didn't know if like Butch himself was in there. Like,
no. It was not. No. It was one of the media relations people.
He'd always have somebody else,
Yes, I mean, well, Butch was to the point where he, if you wrote stuff about him that was good, he would tweet it to people, or he would text message it to people and be like, "Did you see this thing that somebody wrote about me?" And also, if you wrote something that was bad about him, he would get mad about it, and then the media relations folks would come to you and be like, "Hey, that wasn't very nice. Well, don't say that." About Butch, the most insecure person I have ever seen in almost any job ever, not just college football coaching. It was crazy how little
He's not
self-esteem
the
that guy had.
only one. Like we can't say too much here, but Jeremy Pruitt has a lot of that in him too. Like we've kind of experienced that he's reading stuff still up in New York if he's still going to have a job with the Giants, and not pleased with what he reads about himself and has told people this. So maybe it's just something with college football coaches where they're very, very concerned with what's out there.
Far too much, and I hope that Heupel is more secure in himself. I mean, I can even say
I bet he's still reading it. Like they all read it. Like
it's hard
it
not
pops
to.
up. Yeah,
right?
it pops up. Like they see it. I would read. I'd read some of it.
Yeah,
How could
it's
you
hard
not?
not to. With so many people writing so much about you with Tennessee, I mean, the Tennessee media corps is huge. It would be hard not to just at least look at some of it. But
we know Jeremy Pruitt's brother was reading all of it. He commented us on Twitter.
I think he still follows me on Twitter, weirdly.
Yeah.
But I even had a conversation recently with somebody. Again, I won't get too specific. I think about exactly how to say this. Somebody who has a relationship with a former player under Pruitt. It was a player under Pruitt, and I talked to someone who knows that player decently well. And that person told me that Pruitt was just a full-blown tyrant. I mean, just but behind closed doors, it actually wasn't even Pruitt's way or the highway. It was really Saban's way or the highway. And Pruitt was just copying Saban's way. And it almost made me sad, like for the guys who had to play for him, that's had their time in college ruined potentially. And just having to play for a guy like that absolutely sucks. And the encouraging thing is that this person, the player that this person had a relationship with, also has played under Heupel, may still play for him, may not. Again, not going to get too specific. And they spoke very highly of Heupel, so that's encouraging too. They said that it was night and day between Pruitt and Heupel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some things that Heupel has done. Like any coach, it's probably not the greatest look at times. I mean, that's just people in general. But with Butch and Pruitt, the stuff that we've heard since they've been fired or even before, none of it surprised us. Like we kind of expected it, even pretty early on. Like if you'd have said Pruitt's a complete jerk behind closed doors the day he was hired, I mean, we already knew that. We had the stories from his time at Georgia. It wasn't shocking. And with Butch Jones, I mean, we heard about, Cincinnati fans said the same things about him that Tennessee fans say now. With Heupel, I would be a little more surprised, and that's just based on the demeanor we've seen from him and just like his coach's show with Bob Kessling. Like it's just a completely different vibe from the comments that Ramon Foster told us when we had him on the podcast a couple of months ago, how he's just a down to earth, he's just one of the guys. Like he's just real easy to talk to. There's no facade that he's putting up there. It's just him. Take me or leave me. So I think that's a good sign. Like I'm not going to pretend like he's perfect and there's never going to be a bad story, but I don't think it's anything close to the level of what we saw from Butch or Pruitt.
What I've learned through doing media the time that I did, believe people when they tell you things about these guys. And believe the people who don't have a motivation in what they're telling you. I would put it that way. Like I remember it was a story coming out from, I think 247 put it out, and it was maybe like Travis Haney put out like a pretty damning story about Butch Jones, and a lot of people didn't want to believe it.
It was right after the season ended in 2016, like right after.
Yeah, and a lot of people were like, "No, it's not really like that." But when you break that down, what motivation does Travis Haney have to say good things about Butch Jones? None. And what motivation did he have at that point to say bad things about Butch Jones necessarily? And so he doesn't have motivations one way or another. And he's saying like, this is not good with Butch Jones. Hello, somebody. Like just kind of trying to bring attention to it. Believe people in those situations, but also watch out for people that have motivations. If somebody has a motivation to say something kind about somebody when you've heard that they're not kind, watch out for that too, because a good amount of that went on with Butch Jones. A lot of people kind of blowing smoke up his butt when we all sort of knew what was going on in reality. But that's we're going a little deep into something that's kind of beside the point. But I think it's a good conversation to have around all of this, because spring football is certainly a window into that world where, when you put it in full context, you kind of realize what's going on, where yes, we're showing you this, but we're not really showing you anything. I think it's good to talk about. So good conversation there, but let's do in with this. I wanted to end with something else, but let's actually talk about that next week. I do still want to talk about the other thing we were going to talk about, but let's talk about this, because I had a conversation this week about it, and I think putting both of our thoughts on this on tape would be good, because we didn't discuss it last week. We'll talk about this. If the $8 million thing with Nico is true, that's what I want to talk about to end the show. But did you have anything else with spring practice? I want to make sure. I think we covered it all.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. Then, like we said, there's not a whole lot there that you're going to be able to figure out that nobody else already knows at this point.
We did like 40 minutes on it, so
yeah,
there you go. But if Nico got this $8 million deal, and this is purely, I know this is not as timely because it happened a week ago, but we didn't get to talk about it a week ago. The implications of what Tennessee has done in that, again, let's assume it's real. Has Tennessee kind of set a precedent for college football? Did they, in putting up huge money for a huge player, what does that mean? For not just for college football in general, but for Tennessee going forward, because do you set a precedent for yourself in that any big player is going to go, hey man, you gave that guy $8 million or whatever really happened there. Who knows? That's between Nico and the good Lord, but, and Tennessee, I guess. But, does it concern you? Do you love it? I'm interested to know what you think.
I think Tennessee, if it's true, it signals that Tennessee is comfortable playing in that world, because look, I think that it sets a precedent. If you're Tennessee, that you got some Danny White, you got some smart people there working at Tennessee that understand how markets work for players. I mean, in the NFL, you go see Devontae Adams sign this huge deal for a wide receiver, and then all of a sudden Tyreek Hill's getting traded to the Dolphins because he wants more money. Like, it's instantly going to have an impact on recruiting. And I think Tennessee wanted that. I mean, they don't want to go out there and explicitly brag about paying Nico $8 million if it's accurate, but there's a reason that story's out there, and people were going to connect the dots. I mean, you had little clues put in there. As soon as I read the story, that the attorney, like where he's based from, it's the same town that Nico's from, or right beside it. You've got David Ubben contributing to the story, who's just wrote a huge story on Spire Sports and everything they're doing to help get players paid. I mean, he's the one that's done all that digging and all the background on that story. You connect all the dots, like, of course it's Nico. Like, who else can it be? And not also, there's been a lot of those collectives out there that have denied that it was them. Spire Sports is not one that has denied that it was them. So, but to the point, like, that was put out there for a reason. I think Tennessee wants recruits to know, like, hey, we're in this, we're living in this world. We're here to stay. We've set the precedent. We're okay with it moving forward, and that's what we're going to do, because he's not going to be the last 5-star quarterback. And maybe next, 20 every class you're pretty much assigning a guy now, because what we've talked about, you don't know. Guys are going to leave early. They're going to be bust. They're going to transfer. You don't know how it's all going to play out. So you always have to be on to the next guy, and the price is just going to keep climbing from here.
Yeah. If it all transpired the way that it was kind of reported in that story, I love it because, as you said, it's Tennessee outwardly showing we're here. We're going to play with the big boys. We're not messing around. We're going to lay down some cash. Not afraid to do it. And if you want something similar, come and talk to us. They're kind of laying that down. That is also risky, and I assume that this has all been discussed and planned out, and future contingencies have been planned for. It sets that precedent out there that kids will come in and expect big money from you. And what does that mean? What does that lead to? I assume they've planned for that. I hope that they have planned for that. I will obviously assume the best because I think they've handled it excellently so far. And I love that Heupel is showing like we are here. We are the real deal. Don't think that we're just going to be, it's this cute offense with Josh Heupel. No, we're going to bring in elite players. And we're going to play SEC football. Like, I love that they're showing that and not being afraid to show that. But it's a risky venture. This is the Wild West, the new frontier. We don't know exactly how it's going to unfold. We don't know how players are going to react to all of this in the future. Once everything kind of sets in and it becomes more normal and commonplace to have these conversations with players and to set these things out there, what are their expectations going to be? I like a company like On3, the recruiting service. They've started to try to put a price tag on NIL deals. They did this for Nico, and I read the story about it, and their price tag was like $350,000, something like that, relative to the amount of social media followers he has, the sort of clout, quote unquote, that he would have being the quarterback at the University of Tennessee, the clout that he gets by being a huge recruit, being what is he, the number 2 or number 3 I believe the number 3 quarterback in the class of 2023. They formulate all of that in there, and they came out with like $350,000. They did not come out with $8 million. But of course, $8 million is kind of, to put it simply, there's a lot of terms and things, but is essentially $2 million a year over 4 years. To put it simply, it's and so
that 350 seems incredibly low. Just like, do you think Nico will lead to one sellout of a game that wouldn't have normally been a sellout? Like one game that we've had 90,000 fans suddenly has 100,000 fans because of the addition of Nico and whatever he brings with him, like the whole fallout from it. Wide receivers, whoever, offensive lineman, whoever decides to commit to Tennessee with Nico there, like, does that lead to more sellouts down the road for Tennessee? Because you got 90,000 fans or 100,000 fans versus 90,000 fans. I don't know what the average price of a ticket is, but let's say $50. I mean, that's $500,000 that you've made right there. And then you multiply that over a couple of games a year, all the additional stuff that comes with that too. You could see how in the long run, maybe he is worth that to the program when you think of everything that comes with it. And not because he's not going to, like, Nico's not going to sell $8 million worth of cars via his Instagram, obviously. But on the other end of stuff, when it comes to Tennessee itself, you could generate that much revenue.
I think without a doubt he would if he becomes.
Well, yeah, it's contingent on him panning out.
He has to pan out. But I try to think of a good, the most extreme end being what, Johnny Manziel? I mean, the most high profile, where he's going and hanging out with Drake and being, he was a true full-blown superstar on a national level where people outside of college football fans knew who Johnny Manziel was. Like that, who knows what kind of, in terms of like a monetary value, who knows what that is? Millions and millions and millions of dollars. Make no mistake about it. But even in just the micro sense of what Nico could be, let's just say he becomes like the best quarterback in the SEC during his time at Tennessee. So he's a star in SEC football. And he's not even to that Johnny Manziel level where he's making freak plays and, viral videos and all this stuff. But he's just the best quarterback in the SEC. That alone, if you do that and the team becomes great and you're a top 10 team and you're selling tickets and you're selling merch, and you make that $8 million as the University of Tennessee, you make that $8 million back and more. Now, as the sponsors that might be in on that NIL deal, that's kind of a different conversation. But as the University of Tennessee, he's worth $8 million and a whole bunch more. $8 million multiplied, So I'm fully in support of it. I love it. I couldn't be happier about it. But also I do go, you guys have planned, you got a plan here, right? You've tried to hopefully plan for the future with how all of this goes, right? Because $8 million is a lot, and it's a ton to put on the line. And
there's a lot that has to play out still, where we will how binding is the contract? Because there's nothing that can legally bind you to the school through the NIL deal, because they can't have anything to do with each other. So what happens? And I'm sure all the money, obviously, you might have mentioned this, is it's not up front. It's paid over a certain amount of time. I'm sure that's going to be part of every NIL deal to help guard against some of what I'm about to say. But what happens when a player leaves after 1 year and transfers? What happens then? Is there any legal recourse that the NIL can take? The school certainly can't. Otherwise, they're kind of saying they're guilty of paying a player, which is still illegal technically. The school directly paying a player,
technically.
Yeah, but I mean, if you get into the legal battle, I mean, the school has nothing to stand on from that stance. That's something that's going to be sorted out. We're going to see that happen. I'm pretty confident we're going to see something like that happen at some point.
I mean, I'm pretty sure, right? At this, I don't know. I almost say we need to get somebody that is in this NIL world, like these folks from Spire, on the show. But I don't think that if we had them on, they would tell us the whole.
No, because they're not doing anything on behalf of Tennessee, right?
Exactly. They can't. It's not their fault. They wouldn't be able to divulge that stuff. I don't know who we could talk to get into the real reality of this situation, because couldn't Tennessee and its donors go to just somebody who's printing t-shirts for these kids? Just, they've been making a ton of t-shirts for the baseball team and for, Kennedy Chandler and Santiago Vescovi, and all these guys have just have NIL t-shirts in all the different stores. Couldn't they just go to that team and be or to that t-shirt printer or however that is set up, and basically go let's make a t-shirt deal for this kid for $300,000.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that's happening.
I mean, couldn't that be that?
Such simple? A reverse money laundering scheme. Yeah,
it is. It's money laundering scheme, right? But what I want is confirmation. I want to hear from somebody who's truly in the know. And like we said, talking to these Spire Sports guys would be great and informative, but they're not gonna say that. They shouldn't say that. I wouldn't want them to say that. Don't incriminate yourself. And so I'll do a little digging. See, I don't know who that person would be, but I want to see if we could find somebody.
We know that the school has to be involved, but we just want confirmation of to what extent, because I want to know, obviously they're involved with the recruit themselves and which recruits they're targeting, which can be misleading because you can't just go off of a 24/7 sports offer sheet, because they offer players that aren't really offers all the time. I don't know why they do it the way they do it, but you'll see, I've counted before, Tennessee's offered 600 kids in a year before. It's insane. They're only going to sign 25 to 30 kids. So you have to be communicating with the school on which players they are actually pursuing. And then you how much does Tennessee have to do with the price point? Is Tennessee setting that? Is Tennessee saying whatever you work that out with the kid, whatever it takes? I mean, that's what I'm interested in knowing is how involved are they in the negotiation?
It is fascinating. And at the end of the day, I don't care how it gets done. I don't care.
It's just intriguing, yeah.
Yeah, it's as long as the kid is committed to the University of Tennessee, congratulations all around. Let's pop a bottle of champagne. I'm happy that Nico's in the fold. I don't care how you get there, but I do want to know how you get there. Like I just purely out of curiosity at a minimum, just because it is such a fascinating time in college sports right now with this stuff. I mean, it's finally the facade is coming down of amateurism and all of that stuff. It's finally the NCAA is panicking right now, trying to gain the little bit of relevance that it could even have at this point. And so maybe I'll search around, see if anybody has this, who's listening to the show, has like a suggestion for a person that we could potentially bring on. I'll try, just because it's off season, so we need some content like that. I would love to get more informed and somebody who will be totally 100% honest. Like, here's probably how schools are doing this, and I think that it would be great to know. So I just wanted to have that conversation. Like, everybody was hemming and hawing over it. Oh, he might be the $8 million kid and blah, 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 blah. So just want to make sure that we covered it on this show because it is such a huge topic. But otherwise, Zach, anything else for the good folks at home this week? Did we miss anything that we want to cover?
I did miss something, but we'll text about it after and catch up next week. But
yeah, we'll get there. The thing that I did want to talk about to finish the show before thinking about this deal with Nico was that on an interview with Trey Wallace of Outkick now, right? Josh Heupel essentially, and it's kind of in a roundabout way, you'll see if you listen to the audio clip, essentially confirmed that Tennessee punished itself during this past year for these NCAA violations, and we wanted to get into that, but there was just a lot of stuff to talk about this week. We had to cover it, so that's something we want to cover in the future. I'm going to put it on tape because I want to actually get to it, and it's another interesting topic in terms of what's happening with Tennessee right now. So there is that. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Ragan. We thank you so much for listening. To everybody who has been, cannot appreciate it enough. A couple of our videos, specifically on YouTube, kind of blew up a little bit last week talking about Nico. Everybody wants to hear about Nico, but to whoever listened to it, we greatly, greatly appreciate that. YouTube.com, search A to Z Sports, subscribe to the channel. You won't miss an episode there. If you don't do that and you don't want to see our beautiful faces, I don't know why. First of all, rude. Second, if you just want to listen, the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Spotify, Apple, subscribe there, and we drop the episodes on Mondays. And at Zach TNT, at Charlie_Burris on Twitter, at A to Z Sports, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, A to Z Sports.com for everything that Zach and I write. And otherwise, I think that is all of the administrative work we got to do. Thank you to HelloFresh for the sponsorship. Go by Vols16 is your promo code, VOLS16. HelloFresh.com/VOLS16. And that's it, I think. Charlie Burris, Zach Ragan, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.
She can't find him.